Right, good morning everybody. We'll make a start. Good morning and thank you all for joining us today and welcome to our very first Leakage annual Leakage conference webinar. It's the first in a programme of webinars that we're planning to run over the coming year. I'm Judith Powling and I'm Director of Lodestar and also Director of the Leakage conference, so many of you will know me through that. Today we should have been at the Hilton in Birmingham having our annual conference, but with the impacts of COVID, we had to move the conference to Tuesday the 9th of February. And we have also made a decision to make that event a dynamic virtual event. We'll bring the same rich content and programme, but also discussion and networking. And we're going to make more announcements around that over the coming months. But we really look forward to seeing you there in February. So today I'd like to say a really big thank you to all our contributors here for their time in their preparation and joining us today. Thank you. And I'd also like to say a big thank you to our sponsors and supporters, many of whom have been with us for about 10 years or more. So a big thank you to all of them. Right, today's webinar was really driven as a result of the significant industry initiatives that have been announced over the last 3 months or so, particularly Ofwat's Innovation Fund, the industry's innovation strategy, as well as the Leakage Innovation Heat Map from UCWIR and the work of the Public Interest Commitments Group. We've brought all of those together today in our programme so that we can put our arms around all of that, but also look at them all with a very specific leakage lens. And what do they mean for each other and what do they mean for us? So just before I hand over to Karma Loveday, who is with us today from the Water Report, just a few housekeeping things. Do use the chat on the right-hand side of your screen to pose questions for our speakers. I know they're looking forward to that. And we will cover as many of those as we possibly can. And if we end up with too many, we'll review those after the event with our speakers and look at a way that we can maybe gather information and come back to you. If you want the slides or a particular speaker to take up more of your screen, just need to double click on whoever or the slides, and they will then dominate how it's presented on your screen. Alternatively, if you want to lose the chat and have more screen, there is a button at the top. There's an arrow which is just below chat, and you can just click on that and it will put the chat into the margin. And if you want to retrieve it, just click back on that arrow. So that's all. So now I'm going to hand over to Karma, who's going to chair for us today. Thank you, Karma. Karma Loveday is the founder and editor of the Water Report, and the Water Report is our monthly specialist publication for water, covering all the key issues that affect us in our day-to-day work. So over to you, Karma. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. As Judith said, I'm Karma Loveday. I'm the editor of the Water Report, and in that capacity, I have attended a fair few of the annual leakage conferences, not all 20, as I know some of you will have done, but enough to know that this is a highly informed community, really engaged and absolutely brilliant on the detail. What we're going to be looking at today is the wider context, and as Judith mentioned, specifically linking up the two themes of leakage and innovation, essentially because I think the sector is going to need innovation in the mix if it's going to meet the stretching targets it's committed to for 2025, 2030 and 2050. So first of all, we're going to be hearing about the leakage commitments and ambition, and then we're going to be looking at the various strands of innovation work going on at the moment that will hopefully help realise that ambition. In terms of structure, it's quite a simple structure today, but the time is quite tight. So we've got 4 20-minute segments. Each 20-minute segment includes questions and answers. So please, I would just ask the speakers to be mindful to leave 5 to 10 minutes of their 20-minute segments for the questions. And delegates, it'll be really helpful if you can start posting questions while the speakers are speaking. That way we'll be ready to hit the ground running and get as many questions answered as possible. So just to repeat what Judith said, you click on the chat button and then you can see there's events or sessions. So you actually need to click on the session button and pose your questions in there. and those are the ones that I'll be monitoring. So please do pop them in there. Okay, so let's begin. I'm delighted to welcome our first speaker, and that's Pauline Walsh, who's the Chief Executive of Affinity Water and also Chair of the Leakage Public Interest Commitment. Many of you will remember that Pauline spoke last year at last October's event, and she's going to be bringing us up to date on what's been happening with the leakage PIC since. And just to let you know, for the Q&A section, Pauline will be joined by Peter Simpson, Chief Executive of Anglian Water, and I can't see him yet, but hopefully Bob Taylor, Chief Executive of Portsmouth Water, who co-lead as CEO chairs on the leakage PIC. So over to you, Pauline.
Thank you, Karma, and good morning, everyone. I hope you're all ready for an exciting day of insights, innovation, and lots of good discussion. So back in April 2019, the industry announced that the Water UK Public Interest Commitments, which set out the sector's intention to work together towards 5 challenging environmental and social goals. The goal for leakage is to triple the rate of reduction by 2030. This is unprecedented in our history, but it will help us to meet the considerable challenges posed to water supplies. So as Karma mentioned, I'm working alongside Peter Simpson from Anglian Water and Bob Taylor from Portsmouth Water to sponsor this work. Since the launch of the PIC, companies have come together to really take forward these pledges. And the work is being done very much supported by Water UK and also by some specialist resources from the industry. So the target, as we've said, is a step change for the industry. Leakage had remained stubbornly stuck despite good practices, good information and data being there, but potentially we weren't using it all as effectively as possible. So we needed better collaboration, better working together, and really to create that culture of excellence and innovation. So we're all in no doubt that the target is a stretching one to meet, and it will require the whole industry, from our supply chain through to contractors, through to all of us water companies, to work together to achieve it. And it does form part of a wider term strategy to reduce per capita consumption, which also involves investing in more water transfers and in storage while protecting the environment. We know how important reducing leakage is to our customers, and the more progress we can make on that, the more visible we are in making progress on that, the easier it will be for all of us to persuade and influence our customers to reduce their water consumption. Already the message is very much getting out there that over the next 20 years, there's a very real risk that some parts of the UK will experience water shortages as population growth continues and the climate emergency unfolds. So this is part of the industry stepping up to meet that challenge. So as Judith mentioned, we will be talking today, or there will be some discussion today about some of the really great models that have been developed, such as the maturity matrix, the leakage portal, and the innovation heat map, which Jeremy will be talking about very soon. But this time last year, I remember well, Bob, Peter, Andrea, and I believe we had a few other people. We had a bit of a brainstorm and we were thinking, how do we really move this forward? How do we do things better? And that's where the maturity matrix came about. How do we put together in one place all of the activities that all the companies are currently doing? So for any company who really wants to move things forward, they can quickly at a glance see who is doing what and therefore where they can go for better support. The other idea that came out last week, and I think, Jeremy, you came up with the first idea for the name, was the Wikileaks Portal. But apparently that name had already been taken, so we haven't been able to continue with that name, but the Leakage Portal has certainly been developed. And again, we'll hear more about that this morning. So next slide, please, Judith. So we are making progress. Total leakage was reduced by over 7% in AMP6, and this is the lowest level ever reported. During AMP6, total leakage was reduced by 7%, and that's the equivalent of 3,000 million litres per day. Focusing on 1920, all companies bar one met their leakage targets. And if you compare that to 1718, only 7 out of 18 companies met their target, or in 1920, 15 out of 18 companies met their target. So we are really making progress. Now, our commitment going forward is to reduce leakage by a further 16% by 2025. And again, a further reduction to half the current levels of leakage by 2050. So again, we've started on the journey, but we still have a ways to go. But we also do know that finding and fixing leaks is going to get tougher. So in many cases, water companies have already captured the low-hanging fruit and tackled the big leaks. To meet the stretching target, one of the challenges will be in locating and repairing the smaller to find leaks. And locating these leaks is critical to meeting our targets. And again, that's where innovation, collaboration, working together will be absolutely critical. Smart metering will help us, data and predictive modeling will help us. And I do remember last year at this conference, there was a lot of discussion about data and the yellow stickies that people put on the boards. We looked through at the end of the conference, and one of your asks from the people who attended last year is that we do use data better, that we have a lot of data available, but how do we actively and more effectively use that data to drive progress? So there has been a lot of work to develop that. And again, we're seeing the progress, but still much to do. Next slide, please, Judith. So at this conference last year, we all committed to sharing good practices and experiences. And a year on, I would sincerely hope that no company feels that they're working in isolation, but everybody feels that we are sharing and working together to hit the 2025 targets. We've had some fantastic examples of collaboration in leakage, and just to call out a few, Northumbrian Water recently held its 2020 Innovation Festival entirely online in the current circumstances, but this was the 4th year that this was run. So the pictures you'll see at the bottom of the slide are taken from the Innovate East Festival, which was last year brought together 2,000 people from over 300 organisations. And again, with the aim of finding solutions to some of the big problems being faced by the water industry. So our ask as PIC sponsors is that we all continue to share openly and collaboratively. We did all commit to doing that. And I think during the year, we found that maybe some companies were more willing and more involved. Our ask going forward is that all companies really engage and get involved and make sure we are sharing. And I know Jeremy will be talking later on about some of the significant research that Upware has been doing to promote that. Next slide, please. Judith. Right. Companies are already using a lot of new technologies, and we really should call that out. There's really a lot of great work in place and innovative processes already progressing. So again, bear in mind, we have over 346,000 kilometers of water pipes, so enough to go around the world 8.5 times. So it means we really have our work cut out to meet those targets with that volume of pipe work. But some of the examples of companies using some of those technologies, let me call out just a few. Of course, I need to start with Affinity Water. We achieved in the last AMP a 15% reduction in leakage. And we've done that through using technology, existing technology, but also very much focusing on using data capture and analysis of data to, again, make sure we're focusing on the right areas to get the biggest bang for our buck, and also using innovative and new methods to find and fix leaks. Again, there's been a lot of collaboration, and we've learned a lot of good practices from other companies. And again, we're sharing with others as well what's working for us. So Anglian Water are using thermal imaging drones to find and pinpoint leaks. SES Water has partnered with Vodafone to create an intelligent water distribution network to help them detect and fix leaks. Southeast Water are embarking on a digital water meter trial. Northumbrian Water are using satellite technology to help detect leaks, and also they're using sniffer dogs. Yorkshire Water are piloting the UK's largest smart water network. Thames Water are using smart meter upgrades and digital technology, and Essex and Suffolk Water has teamed up with others to harness the power of space satellites to help spot leaks on the network. So a lot of really brilliant activities in place. So we'll continue to work on the maturity matrix that I mentioned earlier and the leakage portal. And these will give us, these are great resources so we all can have visibility of what's happening, what's working, so we can better share with each other. I would say we'll be hearing later on from Rachel and Ofwat on the Innovation Fund. And again, Peter, Bob and I are very keen that we use some of these activities and sharing of work activities together to apply for some of that funding. Because clearly leakage is an area that all companies will benefit from, And the more we can collaborate, the better we can deliver for our customers and for all of our stakeholders. Next slide, Judith. So, bearing in mind the time, have I missed one slide here? I think I've gone through them all. Bearing in mind the time, I think I'll go to the last slide and say thank you very much. It's been a big year. I do want to reiterate, we have made great progress. And again, I do remember last year the challenge from one of the speakers that we've been having this conference for 20 years. And I know some of the questions were, if we've been having this for 20 years and such great ideas out there, why aren't we shifting on leakage? And why have we stayed relatively static over the 20 years? I think we can all confidently say that we have started to move the dial. We have started that decline, but it is only going to get tougher because, as I said, the low-hanging fruit potentially is gone. Now it's really getting those more difficult to find leaks. So this is really going to mean collaborating, working together, thinking innovatively, and probably most importantly, fastly implementing good practices and things that work. So let's share all of that together. Okay, and with that, I say thank you, and I'm inviting Bob and Peter to join me if we have any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Pauline. And as you can see, Bob Taylor has now joined as well. So Bob, Peter and Pauline are standing by for your questions. Just as a reminder, there are two buttons under the chat function. There's event and session. I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, please, to put any kind of casual chatter in the event, and then we can keep the session button for questions, and that will make it easier, I think, to identify them in the chat. So I will start with a question, if that's okay, while we wait for some to come in. So, I mean, there's obviously an awful lot going on at all the companies, and the statistics from last year, the 7% sector-wide fall, it felt to me as an outsider that there had been a corner turned, and suddenly the 2025 and the 2030 commitments seemed perhaps a little bit more achievable than it had seemed before. So perhaps just to open up by asking how you feel about progress since the public interest commitments were announced, and given that we've got 10 more years to get there, do you feel confident with the progress that we've seen so far in the last 18 months or so? I'll start with Pauline for that one.
Sure. So I'm very confident that we will achieve those targets, and not because we know how we're going to do it, but because of the way we're approaching it. Because of the fact that we have been able to make that really step change in the last year, but actually in the last 2-3 years, we've seen really a big step up from all companies. So yes, I think that progress has indicated the art of the possible. So I definitely believe we will continue to see that curve going down. But the more we reduce the leakage, the more difficult it gets to really get to those next levels down. And that's really going to be the challenge. And that's really why this PIC and this conference and these opportunities we all have to work together, it is about really understanding very quickly what works and then very quickly implementing it across the sector to get the gains as quickly as possible.
Okay. And you mentioned the maturity matrix, which I think was really interesting. And I imagine that's looking at which companies are doing well on which aspects and where learnings can be found. So given that this is a sector-wide target, how much will the focus be on catching up those companies that are kind of underperformers versus further advancements for those that are high performers? Perhaps if I can bring Peter or Bob to answer one of those.
It's going to be the low-hanging fruit. The opportunity to move the number will obviously will be done more easily with companies that have higher levels of leakage and those that have lower levels of leakage. And that really goes to the point that as you get to very low levels of leakage, it's much higher hanging fruit, and it's much more difficult to get at. But I think also we all have to remember that looking at tripling the rate of leakage reduction is an overall target. The reality of the need for water and the demands for water are different across the country. So for us in the East, it isn't just about chasing a number, it's about actually making sure that we've got supply-demand imbalance within 5 years because of the impact of climate change and a significant loss in abstraction licenses. So I think sort of the trite answer would be, well, obviously, if we can move companies that have higher levels of leakage forwards more quickly, then that's going to contribute to the overall number. And that's a good thing. That's going to have the biggest, quickest impact. But we can't forget the detail about actually it does matter where the water's being saved relative to what the environment needs and what the impact of a changing climate is for particular companies and their own targets.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a couple of questions coming in on the chat now. The first two are actually quite similar. So perhaps if I ask one of them, and I think it will wrap up the second one. So from Alan Cunningham and Michael Nicholson, in your opinion, how has the COVID-19 pandemic and understanding shift in priorities over the last few months affected the industry in trying to maintain sufficient focus on reducing leakage? Bob, would you like to comment on that one?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting question, and certainly from my own perspective at Portsmouth, we were very conscious of not wanting to see the good work we'd done on leakage reduction over the last sort of couple of years, particularly eroded away because of the limitations that were imposed on us with COVID. So we, like most other companies, I think, whilst we're sensitive to customer needs and not trying to get in customers' faces during the early days of lockdown, we still maintained activity on kind of active leak detection on our network, and we managed to keep a lid on things. Things didn't kind of, I mean, I'm glad to say we didn't have any adverse weather events during that period at the back end of the winter as it was, but which helped things, but we managed to keep things on the straight and narrow and maintain our progress. Obviously, things have changed more recently as restrictions have lifted and we've got back to more like business as usual activity. But yeah, we did have to refocus things. We perhaps spend more time working on our network because we were out of the way of customers. Able to get out traffic and actually in some ways that helped us with our progress. So I think, you know, we still have our long-term targets. I think although COVID is dragging on a bit, we have to see it in the context of our 5-year plan for PR19 and beyond that as well.
Okay, thank you, Bob. The next question is from Peter Crowder. Are the reductions in leakage being matched by a reduction of water inputs into supply? Peter?
There's been a very significant increase in domestic demand for water through COVID. Obviously, people are in different places, and people staying at home, working from home, has moved demand around the country in very different ways. And you know, we're certainly as a company seeing the impact of people who used to commute into London. They're not now. They're at home and they're using water there. So it has, the PCC challenge has definitely increased off the back of this, and that on the other side of this means that we've got to do a lot more, particularly in terms of metering and smart metering and the behavioural interventions we can make because that particular challenge has got that bit harder. And I think that's probably makes another point actually, is we have to look at this as a whole thing. It's no good if we're all sort of patting ourselves on the back about leakage if PCC runs away from us. You know, ultimately there's only a certain amount of water, and we have to think about all the dimensions of it. But that's one which has been adversely impacted by COVID. And there was a reduction in demand from the commercial customers, and that's starting to pick back up again, but it hasn't offset the demand from domestic.
Thank you, Peter. I've got 2 more questions. I'll try and quickly get through those before we move on. So the next one is from Derek Proctor, which is a follow-up on the COVID point. How has COVID impacted innovation trials as companies focus on supply and demand and operational issues? And given we're 1/10 into an AMP, are the proposed plans still valid? Pauline?
I was going to suggest we might leave that one for Jeremy later on, who's probably more involved in the innovation trials. But again, I would share what Peter and Bob have said. Is we have continued to give this a really high focus, and I would build on what they've said. The COVID-19 has increased demand. And I think that's had a twofold effect, which makes leakage even more important than it has been when we talked about a year ago. One, because water is more scarce, and again, it's a supply-demand balance, as Peter said. So there's less to go around. So we need to make sure we're keeping everything we can in the pipes. But secondly, there's been a shift in perception and the requirement on water companies to protect the environment, because as people have stayed at home, they have become much more aware of the environment, and they want us to take care of the environment. So when they see leaks, that means, that is seen as us as water companies or the water sector not taking care of the water. That's seen as us not doing enough to make sure we were abstracting less and having less of an impact on the environment. So I think that the COVID-19 has had additional pressures from those two sort of viewpoints as well.
Okay, thank you. We are short on time. I'm going to quickly squeeze in one more and then we'll have to move on, I'm afraid. But as Judith said, we can pick up any other questions after the session and try and get you answers to them. So very quickly, as the 16% is a sector-wide commitment, is there a danger that all the focus will be on the 4 or 5 largest companies whose numbers are big enough to really make a difference? Perhaps, Bob, would you like to comment on that as one of the smaller companies?
Yeah, I don't think that's a factor at all. I mean, I think leakage is as big an issue for all of us, or is a very big issue for all of the companies in the sector, and that's because of a number of factors, but primarily because of what customers think about it and the environmental angle as well. So I really don't think that this is about a numbers game to try and, hit our targets. I mean, the 16% targets, by and large, that's not the same. We haven't got the same target for everybody, but they're broadly around at that level, and that figure is the same for everybody. So, in trying to hit our targets within the pick of tripling our rate of leakage reduction, yeah, that is an aggregated figure, but the basic targets are company-wide, and nobody can ignore leakage. Everybody has got to work hard at it now, and never has that message or that philosophy been stronger.
Right, thank you, Bob. I can see everyone else is nodding, so they obviously agree with you on that. Okay, so we're out of time for the first session, I'm afraid. Thank you very much to Pauline, Peter and Bob. I think you're going to be on the call for a little while, so maybe you can pick up on a few points later on as well. But for now, we will move on to our second presentation. So please welcome Andrea Geisen. She's the Innovation Manager at Thames Water, and she's going to be talking about the new Water Industry Innovation Strategy. Over to you, Andrea.
Thanks very much, Karma, and good morning, everybody. Pleasure to be here again, a year since the last presentation. And I'm really pleased to say that in the meantime, the Water Innovation Strategy is live. We did it, which feels like a phenomenal achievement for those of us who've been close to it. And Jez can probably back me up on that one. I'm going to give just a brief whirlwind overview of the strategy today, and really this is a bit of a call to action, so I'll come to that at the end of my presentation. So moving on to the next slide, I guess very quickly giving you an overview as to why we need an innovation strategy. So in essence, this is about removing some of the barriers to innovation and collaboration. I guess the catalyst for the strategy was Ofwat's decision document back in December of 2019, which announced the £200 million innovation funding. And perhaps you could argue that this is something that's long overdue because we recognise there are challenges in transparency across the sector. So what are our innovation needs? How, if you're an innovator, do you access the water companies? How do you access the innovation funding that's out there, either at company level or at a broader level, given the vast array of funding mechanisms that exist? but it's not always obvious which of those are applicable to the water sector. And of course, talent development is absolutely vital if we want to be successful in transformational innovation. So all of those things compounded to drive the need for this innovation strategy. Moving on to the next slide, we have developed a sector innovation strategy. So the water companies have led this work, but it's very much been done on behalf of the sector as a whole. So what this slide doesn't show is the phenomenal engagement we've had from across the market. So the draft strategy, which was published back in July, was downloaded over 2,000 times. We had, I think, around 400 attendees at the launch webinar for the draft strategy, and several hundred participants in our workshops throughout August, which really were around shaping the strategy and making sure it was appropriate and relevant to all of the stakeholders within the sector, but also potentially beyond. And I'm pleased to see we had a brilliant combination, not just of our existing supply chain, but also innovators who are interested in potentially coming into the water market, both within the UK and overseas. And ultimately, that's what this is all about. So moving on to the next slide, we set ourselves a vision for the strategy, which was to create open collaboration opportunities across the water sector, to drive transformational change through innovation that delivers greater value for customers and the environment. Perhaps nothing surprising in there, but really just articulating that need that we really need to make a step change. There is loads of brilliant innovation activity across the sector, across the industry already, but the scale of the challenges we face, whether it's climate change or population growth on a medium and longer term basis, or whether it's short-term challenges such as those that COVID-19 have brought to bear, we really need to make sure that the impact of the innovation that's happening across the sector is maximised. We then looked at the principles that we wanted to adopt for the strategy. So the next slide outlines those for us. Collaboration absolutely has to be at the heart of this. And essentially, yeah, there's a couple of areas we can break that down into. So collaborating with each other as water companies. It is naive to imagine that we all have the identical challenges, and yeah, that was called out in the chat earlier about the differences in our asset bases, the way we operate those asset bases, the structure of the populations in our regions. But without a shadow of a doubt, we do also have common challenges where it makes sense for us to work together to leverage the investment each company is making, and to make sure we're bringing together the best skills to be successful. But of course, collaboration isn't just about water companies working with other water companies. We have to be working effectively with our supply chain. And in my opinion, all too often we let a fairly traditional contract and we badge it as collaboration. We need to get much more, move much more into that co-creation space. And again, we've got some brilliant examples of that, but that needs to become our everyday. And of course, that access to be able to collaborate is really about making sure that our challenge, again, comes back to making sure in the first instance there's a visibility of challenges so people know what the opportunities are for collaboration. The second area is leveraging our data and new ways of working, and that's something that Pauline called out earlier, that we have so much data available to us as a sector, and we need to make the most of that in tackling these challenges. That's not always easy. You know, many of us, and I know this is true of my own organisation, and I'm sure we're not alone. We have a lot of legacy systems. Our data exists in silos. In terms of bringing those data together in order to really maximise the insight we can drive from them, that's absolutely crucial. But then going further than that, how do we open that data up to make it valuable to the supply chain, to the innovators we want to collaborate with? It's not as simple as just dumping data out there and opening it up to people. It has to be done in a structured way with the appropriate governance to actually make it valuable. Making space for innovation culture is a really important point. We often tag innovation on to people's job descriptions. We expect them to be innovative, but the demands of the day job are always there. So how do we make innovation the day job? How do we embed that in the culture of our own organisations? And I think some of the companies have really led this effort through embedding innovation into employee targets, employee opportunities. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback on the line. I'm not sure where it's coming from, but perhaps if you're not speaking, maybe try and mute yourselves. Just conscious that people may not be able to hear.
I think Peter and Greg, you might need to mute yourselves.
In my defence.
But I do apologise. It didn't. Okay. Thank you.
It sounds like it's improved now. Sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to make sure people were able to hear. The final area of our principles being led by environmental, social and economic purpose. Obviously, this ties right back into the public interest commitment, to the drive for public value that all of the companies have increasingly demonstrated, recognising that we provide an essential service, and our responsibility as water companies goes beyond simply the direct services we provide to our customers, but also again recognising that at a sectoral level there's an opportunity for us to work much more closely with the other organisations, individuals that have a responsibility, that are custodians for the environment. For example, so that rounds out the principles we set out for the strategy. Again, we really wanted to tie this back to the broader strategic intent of the industry, so hopefully nothing surprising there. Then moving on to the themes for the strategy. This was an opportunity to really build on the excellent work that's already been done, and I'm conscious there are a lot of words on this slide. I don't expect you to read them all. But when looking at the themes, we built these around the UCWIR big questions, which of course many of you will be familiar with, and if you're not, Jez will be talking about that later this morning. The UCWIR big questions have already been the product of several years of collaboration amongst the water companies, and so they articulate the industry challenges very, very clearly and very well. And so we built our themes around those, but also recognised that for a sectoral strategy we needed to think broader than that. So we brought in the Sustainable Development Goals, which of course are so closely tied into to the water industry, into the water sector. And so the 7 themes that we've developed are really a combination of those two areas. I was perhaps a little bit surprised when I didn't see leakage as one of those headline titles, given how much emphasis there is on that. But I think that really goes back to the point that Peter made earlier, which is that leakage is really a factor of balancing supply and demand for within our companies, for our customers, for the environment. And so leakage features in the theme of taking a sustainable approach to consumption and production. The important point to make is that that's not at all about diminishing the importance of leakage. What it is about is recognising the fact that it is a part of a much more complex value chain within our companies, within the sector. We need to recognise that it needs to work hand in glove with the work that we're doing from demand management, per capita consumption, all the way through to the new water resources that we are developing. So I just wanted to round off by talking a little bit about how we plan to implement this strategy. So the next slide talks about the Centre of Excellence. And for those of you who have seen the strategy document, there is a section that talks about the Centre of Excellence as a key enabler to how we're going to, how we aim to implement the strategy. The objectives for the Centre of Excellence are very, very consistent. I hope you agree with the objectives for the strategy overall. But essentially, this is going to be the mechanism by which we would like to bring innovation to bear at a much more joined up level across the sector. Moving on to the next slide, this just gives a little bit of an overview of the functionality we anticipate for the Centre of Excellence. So things like a single point of access for proposals for the sector, publishing our industry-wide challenges so that those are visible to all potential innovators. Now, the column that's missing from this, which you'll see if you download the strategy, is that these aren't new functions necessarily. Some of them are new, but some of them are building on existing capability or existing functions that already exist within the sector. So, for example, the Wikileaks Portal would be a brilliant home for that potentially in the future. So this is about a signpost for all the great stuff that's already happening, leveraging what's already happening, not investing in duplicative efforts, which is the last thing we need in order to be efficient and to reach our goals. So my last slide is really the call to action that I mentioned earlier. The strategy is live. So what's next? What I would encourage you to do, if you want to learn a little bit more about the strategy, is to attend next week's launch webinar. If you go to waterinnovation2050.org.uk, there's a link there to register for the launch. That's going to be an interactive discussion, and you'll hear not just from the water companies, but from many of the other stakeholders that have been involved in the development of the strategy. Through October and November, we'll be developing our challenge statements. So one of the points of feedback that we had on the strategy, and there was a mixed view on this, was that our themes were quite high level. In general, we had support for that. We want to not close the door on any opportunities, but of course, we need to be realistic that to really get to specific innovative solutions, we need to be much more clear about how we articulate the challenges we have in our sector. We need to be much more specific. And so through October and November, we'll be developing those challenge statements. And that also links to the Ofwat Innovation in Water Challenge that Rachel will talk about in a short while. What I would really encourage you to do as the leakage professionals in the water companies is engage with your innovation teams within your organisations, making sure that our leakage challenges are really represented within those innovation challenge statements. And for the supply chain, and again for water company colleagues out there, starting to think about what are the proposals that we might want to bring forward for that innovation in water challenge. That is going to come around really quickly, so we need to be thinking about that now. Then the final area we're continuing to work on is developing the Centre of Excellence, so in particular the strategic and economic case. What will it do, when will it do it, and how much will it cost, and of course how will we fund that? So again, that's work that's actively going on at the moment. We expect to be able to make further announcements on that by the end of the year. So that's all from me, and hopefully that's stimulated some thoughts and perhaps some questions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Andrea. That was excellent overview of all that complicated but quite exciting work. So we've got a couple of questions coming through for you in the chat. So the first one picks up on a point that Peter made in the previous session about every company facing unique challenges. And it's I think it's just sort of seeking your opinion, really. It says we can't afford blanket applications. Isn't tailoring solutions to unique circumstances and being more forensic in the application of innovation critical, particularly given the financial constraint? So would you like to just comment on that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. We need to be mindful of the fact that the water companies are not clones of one another. Our asset bases are very different. The context in which those asset bases operate are very different. But that said, there are some common challenges across the sector. I think where the way I always feel we should approach this, and it's something Jez and I have talked a lot about in the past, is that there will be certain areas which are more pressing for other companies, and that's where we should drive innovation. So, for example, if I look at my own organisation, Thames Water, we have perhaps some of the biggest challenges around how we get in and make repairs on our network because of the urban density across London. So it would be right and proper that we were leading the charge on innovative repair solutions. We're not quite there yet, but I hope over the course of the AMP we will be. Now, those solutions may or may not be a lift and shift into other water companies, but actually adapting a solution that's been developed is in most cases going to be more efficient, more effective than starting from scratch. So I think in different areas there will be leaders and there will be followers, and that's right and proper. There will be some areas where solutions simply aren't applicable to the same extent. It's a little bit removed from leakage, but for example, the investment we're making in trunk mains research is not unique to Thames Water, but our particular challenge is so much larger because of our large estate of cast iron trunk mains that we're the only water company that would really have an imperative to make the level of investment that we're making in that area. And it's fundamentally important for us that's successful. Elements of that may well be applicable to other water companies, but it simply wouldn't be appropriate for others to be investing at the level that we're investing in. So hopefully that gives a little sense.
Yeah, I think it does. Thank you. And another comment here, perhaps for your reflection, from Michael Strahand. Innovation has to start with a why. There are a lot of great supply chain companies with amazing people and ideas. I have found there are times when a great solution has been found to the wrong problem. My opinion is there needs to be a deeper examination of why water companies want to do things.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that's something that we hope that this strategy will start to tackle. I'm under no illusions that this is really just the beginning; it's the start of the journey. But by articulating our high-level ambitions and then translating that into specific challenge statements, that essentially is us beginning to articulate the why. And I know it's something that we won't solve just at the industry level. We need to do that within our own organisations as well. Speaking for Thames Water, we've obviously had a fairly turbulent time in terms of meeting our leakage targets through AMP6, and that stimulated an enormous amount of activity. So being coordinated and being efficient with our resources and being always very clear, crystal clear as to why we're doing things. I think that's something that we absolutely need to work on. I think the strategy hopefully starts to address that at an industry level, but it's something that we need to continue to work on at an organisational level as well.
Okay, thank you. There's a very one I think you can give a very quick answer to, and then we'll have to move on. From Laurie Reynolds, is the Centre of Excellence in operation now? I think you can answer that probably quite quickly.
Absolutely, it's not just yet. As I mentioned, I hope we will be in a position to make a further announcement by December of this year. In the meantime, if you visit waterinnovation2050.org.uk, there are contacts. There is a contact email there, and that will be picked up by the Innovation Steering Group.
Thank you, Andrea. We just had one question come in, which I think perhaps I'll just take that because I think perhaps Pauline, Peter or Bob perhaps could comment on this one. How are the industry's leadership ensuring barriers are broken and cultures changed to ensure the proposed innovations are adopted, particularly in large organisations? Does somebody want to raise their hand? I could only really afford for one of you to answer that in terms of time. Okay, go on, Peter.
I think starting off with all agreeing that we're all leaning into one common objective is the obvious start.
Bob is answering. That's a fantastic question. I think it is always a challenge within a company to take ideas that have worked elsewhere and implement, because everybody likes to be the one that comes up with the great ideas. I can only say I think that's what this pick is all about. It is about making it very transparent when there are good ideas and ways of working that have delivered in other parts of the company. That's the maturity matrix. It gives us that visibility, that transparency, that's the innovation.
Okay, I think I've lost Pauline. I'm not sure if everyone else has heard the same, but sorry, Peter, would you like to comment? I know you're about
transparency.
Thank you, Pauline. It's a bit difficult, sorry, to there's a bit of lag and everything on the line. Peter, did you want to just briefly comment on that before we move on?
I think it's good starting point of having a common shared objective, which all the chief execs are backing, with Pauline, Bob and Carl, is a good starting point. Clearly, the success of a lot of this will be the behaviours that we see within the company, and our ability to operate and share will be based on action, not words. I think we've seen some really encouraging signs over this year, though. So I've constantly on the right track, but the reality is changing culture across companies and organisations and industry takes time.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to our next speaker. I'm just going to ask if all the speakers, apart from our next speaker, could put themselves back on mute, because there is quite a lot of echo going on. That's better, thank you. Right, so we're going to hear now from Rachel Wright. She's the Principal Strategic Advisor at Ofwat, and she's going to give us an update on Ofwat's Innovation Fund, which obviously is very closely linked to the strategy we've just been hearing about. Thank you. Over to you, Rachel.
Great. Thank you, Carmel. I'll just check you can hear me okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. It's been really good this morning, by the way, to hear from Pauline, Peter, Bob and Andrea on the great stuff that's happening in relation to leakage, but also on the Centre of Excellence and the innovation strategy. The discussions have also touched on some of the unprecedented pressures on the sector now, partly because of COVID, but also the longer term challenges that we've all recognised in relation to climate crisis, population growth and demographic change. These challenges and the great work that has been done by the companies in the sector to keep services running through this difficult time have emphasised the need that innovation is so important for this sector, to engage with the supply chain, to learn from one another and to collaborate. By which at Ofwat we mean transformational innovation, which sees ambition to deliver radical change. It's beyond just business as usual. We know that there are underlying barriers to innovation, risk aversion, whether that's perceived or real, regulatory barriers, the need for greater collaboration, for example. We've been really impressed by the response of companies and the supply chain to the current crisis. And I just want to pay tribute to all of those in the sector who've worked really hard during difficult circumstances in the past couple of months to deliver reliable, safe water whilst continuing to enhance the natural environments. And also pointing to Andrea here and her team, the great work of Water UK and UCWIR in developing the joint sector strategy. But we know that at Ofwat we have a really important role in this too, and we're making to that end great progress, I hope, on the Innovation Fund. This is a £200 million fund which will run through to 2024. On the 18th of August, we published our decision on the design and implementation of that fund and the competitions that will be run. And I'll talk through some of the key characteristics now. But just for anyone who's worried about the slides, all this information is available on our website, but also in our paper that we published in August. And I think Judith has said she's sending the slides around as well. So next slide, please, Judith. I'm going to talk now about who can actually access the fund. For now, we're restricting access to the 17 water and wastewater companies, but also the NAVs. This is in part because the fund is paid for by customers. It's collected through the PR19 revenue allowances. And so we really need to be able to be sure and confident in the way that we distribute those monies to the winning bidders. But we will be keeping eligibility under review, particularly after the first couple of rounds. For third parties, innovators, startups, you're all really encouraged to partner up with those incumbent water companies. It's really, really important, and Andrea's made reference to this in her talk just now, about the role of collaboration and partnerships in driving innovation. And so we really are encouraging those companies to open up their doors and to invite innovators, third parties, people right across the value chain, but also outside of the water and wastewater sector to join up in tackling some of these challenges. I'll move on to the next slide now, Judith, please. In terms of what the competitions are looking like, we're running a smaller challenge starting in January, which is called the Innovation in Water Challenge. This is focused on smaller projects up to a guide of around £250,000. And these will be guided by the challenge statements that Andrea was talking about. We really recognise that it's the companies and third parties in the sector that really recognise where innovation is most likely to have the biggest effect. And it goes back to the question and comment I think we had on why. And so these challenge statements are really, really important for acting as a guide to some of those projects that we hope to see through the Innovation in Water Challenge. We'll make decisions on the winning bids for those in March 2021, next year, and that will soon be followed by the first round of the main competition in April 2021, where there'll be a total pot of around £40 million. Ofwat, we are not going to be the decision makers on the winning bids. We think it's really, really important that there is independence and confidence in the decision making. And so to that end, we will be appointing an expert panel. And we hope that that expert panel will bring experience and expertise from not just the water sector, but also innovation that is stimulating and delivering on innovation. Next slide, please, Judith. In our decision document, we have set out 5 strategic themes. Yeah, here we go. You might not be able to see these, but they're all available online, and I'll just highlight some of them. When you're thinking about what types of projects, what sort of ideas might be appropriate to put forward to Ofwat's Innovation Challenge, I really encourage you to think through how they meet one or more of these strategic challenges. We haven't yet set out what our assessment criteria is. We're working on that now, but I can be pretty sure that it will stem down from these strategic challenges. There's a bit of a clue there for you. These challenges relate to climate change and the sector's ambition of net zero emissions. There's one relating to improved environments and maintaining that for current and future customers. We've of course recognised the challenge of long-term operational resilience and infrastructure. We'd like to see some projects relating to new ways of conducting core activities, and also importantly, recognising the opportunities provided by open data, new business models, and collaboration that bring benefits to customers. I've put a star on here by the ones that I think are particularly relevant but to leakage, but you can have a look over that yourselves when you can see the table better. We also, and I haven't put them on the slides because the text would just be too heavy, we have 8 principles which also should act as a guide to the types of innovative projects that we're looking for. I'll just highlight a few. Our first principle states that innovation is not just about the development of new technologies. Innovation can also be developed by doing things differently and having the right systems, processes, and people to support activities. So whilst new tech, shiny new tech is really exciting, we recognise that there's lots of other areas in which companies can develop innovation. Our second principle talks about transformational innovation that companies would not otherwise explore or invest in. And as I said earlier, that means it's not just about business as usual. We are looking for a step change, a radical change in the way in which companies and third parties work to meet the challenges of the future. Our third principle talks about how we are keen to not just see a focus on rollout. Rollout is, of course, really, really important, particularly when we're talking about spending customers' money and wanting to see some outcomes and some clear measures of success. But we also recognise that the early stages, the incubation of new ideas and solutions are really important to innovation, and with that there will be a degree of failure. What's important there is that we learn from that, we are able to monitor and evaluate appropriately and take forward the learnings from that into future ideas and approaches. I'll let you read more of the principles in detail, but hopefully that gives you a flavour and a bit of a guide of what you should be looking for if you are thinking about engaging with the Ofwat Innovation Fund. Considering leakage specifically, I think it's pretty clear that there is opportunity here, but just stressing that message that it isn't just about business as usual. And it was really good to hear Pauline and Peter and Bob talk earlier about a step change when it comes to tackling leakage. Next slide, please, Judith. So the next steps for us at Ofwat, you may be aware that we have committed to appointing a supporting organisation, an innovation partner, to help us deliver these competitions. It's not something that we as the economic regulator have done before, and so we're hoping that that partner will bring in some really strong experience and expertise in running competitions, and we're just in the process of evaluating the tenders for those at the moment. We're hoping to have that partner in place in the next few weeks. Once they're on board, we should be good to go with providing more guidance and clarification on the actual application process and assessment processes for that Innovation in Water Challenge that we're launching in Q4 this year. We're continuing to work with the sector, including Andrew and the team over at the sector strategy. And we're going to keep doing this right through the process. We recognise that learning and evaluating and evolving our approach to this competition is going to be really important, because it's not something that we or the sector has done before. To that end, we've been really clear that we are running a pilot period between now and March 2022. And there'll be a pause at that point by which we think about how we take forward the remainder of the competitions through to the end of 2024. For you guys and the industry, I think now is really the time to, if you're part of the value chain, reach out to water companies with your ideas. If you are a water company, open up your gates, allow people to come and approach you, open your doors. I don't think I can stress enough how important it is to us that we see collaborative efforts. That's not just company to company, we accept those, but also company to third party, company, third party. There's lots of different arrangements that we can imagine. We want you to be looking, as I've said, at the ability to roll out at scale, but also we are open to those proposals which are more at the early stages of the TRL. And we want you to consider the Innovation Fund as a tool for sector-wide innovation, not only for processes available. We expect to see continued innovation to protect customers, improve company performance, and enhance the natural environment. So in conclusion, it's really important that this work is owned and driven by the sector, and in part that is through the sector strategy, although I recognise that the sector strategy sits much more broadly than just the Ofwat's Innovation Fund. We want companies to be working with the supply chain, with other sectors in the UK and also internationally. It's okay to partner for this competition with international companies. We've been really pleased with the wide range of engagement and interest that we've had so far on this. And when we put out our consultation in May, we were overwhelmed by the number of responses and high quality responses we got to help us develop some of the policy areas. We see the Innovation Fund as a catalyst for change. Innovation shouldn't just be about this competition, about the next 5 years. We want to see innovation being embedded as part of the culture of the UK water and wastewater sector. So this really is just a springboard, we hope, to encouraging that conversation and those relationships. I'll leave it there for now and open it up to any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Rachel. Particularly, I'm sure welcome will be the invitation to engage, and I'm sure anyone on the call can get in touch with Ofwat afterwards for specific details of exactly how to do that, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of appetite. But just before we take some questions for you, I think Peter has another speaking engagement. So I think you're going to have to shoot off now, Peter. Is that right?
I'd much rather stay here. It's the Moody's conference, but yeah, unfortunately, I need to go and join that one. So
thank you very much for taking part, and on behalf of everyone, yeah, thank you very much. It was great to hear from you. Right, Rachel, so we've got some questions here. So the first one, innovative thinkers are usually disruptive, even mavericks. Too much process and hoop jumping may dissuade engagement. Will a committee actually tend to choose the least risky innovation project?
I can't speak for any committee we have, but we don't have in mind an ideal view of what a portfolio of projects looks like through this. I think we would want to see some more risky projects, but perhaps of smaller value, and where there's more confidence in projects, then perhaps lending themselves to a higher value. But I can't, it would be wrong for me, I think, to anticipate exactly what a good set of projects coming through this looks like. That's almost counter to innovation, and I'm not the right person to be saying that. There is a recognition from us that innovation comes with risk. For true innovation, you will have failure, and we totally recognize that. I think what's important is that potential risks are identified earlier on and monitored, and learning is captured so that that can then be taken forward. So although a project might not be successful in delivering exactly what it set out, it's informed and allowed future conversations and development in other areas. So there's always a success there to be had.
Okay, great, thank you. And you mentioned international collaboration, and we've got a question on that. It says, lots of the challenges we have are the same the world over. How would Ofwat view international collaboration, where part of the innovation is paid through the Ofwat fund and part of it paid for by research bodies from other countries?
Yeah, we're supportive of partnerships with international bodies. We have put protections in place around customer money precisely for this point. So rollout, it has to be, there is a focus on rollout, but there's also, when we talk about intellectual property rights, in the first instance, we are saying that newly developed intellectual property rights funded through this competition will have to be made royalty free with the rest of the sector. So there are some provisions in there precisely to protect the fact that it's public money. But we hope that it's not enough to discourage partnerships either with third parties or with international players as well.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much. There are no more questions for you. I can see, Pauline, you've posted a comment. Would you like to just briefly touch on that point, and then we'll move on to the final presentation?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I thought that was a great question from Joe Finn. And as I said there, I think in order to create that culture and to be able to implement that good practices, first and foremost, you need to have visibility of them. And again, that just reiterates how important this PIC is, and some of the projects are being developed and some of the tools are being developed to give us that visibility. But then creating a culture where people will look and seek out those innovations and implement them. That is about us, I think, as leaders in the sector, to make sure we're pulling on that. And I do know we have been challenged as a sector before for maybe doing lots of pilot projects and innovation, but not implementing actually some real outputs from those. But again, that's all part of this PIC, which is trying to encourage and drive that where it's successful, that we do actually put them in place. But yeah, that's good.
Brilliant, thank you for that, Pauline. Okay, so we're going to move on to our final presentation now from Jeremy Heath. I'm sure a familiar face to many of you, the Innovation Manager at SES Water. Jeremy's going to update us on UCWIR's work, both on the Zero Leakage Big Question and the Leakage Innovation Heat Map. So over to you, Jeremy, thank you. Jeremy, I think you're still on mute.
I've been very good at muting myself when I'm not speaking. It's nice to see that some traditions carry on. And obviously I've got the graveyard slot at the end of the conference when everybody's trying to their railway stations and catch the train. Lovely to be in a situation where that's not going to be occurring this time. Okay, let's work our way through. So obviously most of you would have come across the UCWEAR process here, and this is the zero leakage. This is our route map. These are the projects that we've got ongoing at the moment, and you'll see it breaks down into our 6 outcomes at the top. And we talk about PALM, the prevent, aware, locate, mend. We know that leakage has to cover all of these areas. So that's been going on well. Number of projects coming through on that. But what I want to talk about this morning is about the leakage innovation heat map work that we did. So a year ago, I was standing in front of you telling you that I was going to be coming around and visiting all of the water companies. And that happened. I managed to get that all done before lockdown occurred. So it's the kind of end of last year, beginning of this year. And I managed to visit every single water company and talk through with them the innovation heat map, the work that we were doing, and talk through with them about the results we were starting to see from that. And the purpose behind that was to get this innovation heat map for leakage, capturing the current research programs. There is loads of duplication going on within companies. One of the first times we come across what's going on in a company is when we go to a conference, somebody stands up and we realize we're working on exactly the same thing, probably with exactly the same people. And so I wanted to see whether there are opportunities for collaboration by capturing those current research. Obviously, it's going to inform the development of the UCWEAR leakage big question on leakage. So, you know, we want to see where there's little research taking place. What I don't want to do is put UCWEAR money into areas which are well researched and everybody knows what's going on there. Wanted to start to focus that down better on areas of poor research that we still need to solve. Okay, absolutely about fostering collaboration between companies, and recognize quite early on that there was a real opportunity here to show who was working on on the same things at the same time. But the other bit behind that was the company coming into a new area. So a company decides, okay, I'm going to start looking at, I don't know, dynamic pressure management. They could very quickly look up and see who's already working in that area and go and talk to them rather than starting from scratch and duplicating everything. And I'll be quite honest, I wanted to put our sector in the best position for future funding opportunities. We knew that there was going to be this funding opportunity coming through. And I really want Leakage, our sector here, to make the best use of that funding. Okay, we have heard that collaboration is key to that. Okay, and so what I've provided is a tool that allows water companies to collaborate as best as we possibly can. That we know who's working in similar areas, we know who's got the same goals as us. Get that collaboration going really, really early. I'd love to see Leakage take massive advantage of this funding opportunity that we've been hearing about. So 17 water companies, England, Scotland, Wales, contributed 328 projects. I put the link in the chat there so you can download that. It's an Excel spreadsheet, self-contained, and it's got all the details in there. If you haven't got a copy, do go and download one and have a look at it. There's a lot of very useful and interesting information in there. But what I want to do is go through some of the findings that we found. And I broke this down into the 6 areas, okay? Within those, and we're going to go through this, here's 2 that you can see straight away. And we break it down below those into a number of different kind of project areas. So the 2 numbers you can see there, the first number is the number of projects in that particular area. And the second number is how I've scored them. Now the score is the cumulative score for those projects based upon the value of those projects to the wider water industry. Meaning, I look at the size of the project, I look at the willingness to share the information that's coming out from that, and I look at the status of the project. So effectively, a fully complete project of greater than 500K, okay, where the company is willing to share everything, that gets the maximum score of 40. So there's a scoring mechanism that goes on in there as well. So what does that tell us? Well, look at that first area there. All new leaks are found quickly after they break out. Most of our research is going at the moment in non-acoustic leak detection. That's that 959 you see. And that's typically things like satellite, drone service, thermal imaging. We're seeing some work in micro pressure and fiber optics all in there as well. A lot of work going on in that area. And I think that's because we've done a lot of work in the acoustics area. We have a better understanding of what's going on there, but we're starting to push into these other areas to see if we can get better understanding of the size of leaks, because acoustics obviously doesn't tend to give us that information. There's a wealth of research going on smart networks, a number of trials in the UK. That's the network leakage awareness one that you see, the third one down there. A lot of projects going on. Most companies seem to be investigating smart networks in some form or another. You can see the one on trunk main awareness and trunk main leakage location at the top there. There's some work going on there, and interestingly, we've just completed an upgrade project looking at flow measuring areas, FMZs, to assist with trunk main leakage. So certainly that's becoming a higher priority within companies, trying to understand what's going on there. Okay, large amount of research into property leakage allowances. So if you look at the bottom one there, this is the outcome we can confidently quantify leakage, demonstrate when it's zero. Okay. Almost all the research there is in one area, property leakage allowances. And a lot of that work was because companies wanted to look at their leakage and say, okay, am I getting the correct balance as part of my leakage calculation? And obviously there was a lot of work going on at the end of last AMP, a lot of companies coming together and saying, right, we're going to try and get a convergence on how we do that, and I want to understand that. My gut reaction is that's probably a one-off exercise, and I think we're going to see that drop out now as a bit of research. I think companies will still be doing smart metering, but probably not using it in quite such a way as they have done for the last couple of years. Okay, all new pipe work is leak-free. So we struggle to lay leak-free networks. Okay, it's one of the bits of information that we've got coming back, and there's not a lot of research going into it either. That's one that we really need to deal with. It's an international problem. It's not just for the UK. I was talking to a Spanish company recently. They relayed almost their entire network and still had a leakage level or non-revenue water in the order of 22%. Okay, so it's still a big issue, laying leak-free networks, and that's something that needs to be reviewed at a senior level. So we're looking at the kind of standards that go with that. We also need to look at how we test new pipe systems, so leak-free. One of the anecdotal evidences I picked up on my leakage roadshow when I went around and visited everybody is that people are struggling with the testing systems for a brand new pipe. And I've been talking with some companies, and I can see that one of them's here today, looking at how we can come up with better ways of confirming that a brand new pipe that's installed is definitely leak-free. Looking at improved pipe fittings as well. I've said this before, but a lot of our fittings are just gas fittings adapted into the water industry, and I'm not convinced that if you were designing them from scratch for a 16-bar water main in a muddy trench, that you would actually do it the way that we're doing at the moment. That's one of the things I'm really interested in looking at, is improved fittings and how we can make it so that it's very easy to connect to a pipe with a very low probability of it leaking. Background leakage, the weeps and seeps. There's not a lot of research going on in that area. I'm guessing that's because there are higher priorities at the moment. We want to deal with the leaks that we can find rather than the leaks that we can't. Okay, the last two areas. New leaks on existing networks are minimized. So that goes down into three particular areas there. We've got to focus on calming networks. So that's reducing pressure transients going through. We've obviously got some projects in on that at the moment, which we're looking at the causes of pressure transients and the effect upon those. Pressure optimization, how we can actually reduce pressure to the minimum possible level within DMAs. Quite a bit of work going on in there as well. Companies are interested in and working on smarter ways of understanding their network condition. Okay, so you can see the mains condition surveying piece that's going on there. If we're going to be relaying pipe, and unfortunately I have to say within the UK we're not relaying a lot of pipe in comparison worldwide, but if we are going to be relaying pipe, we want to make sure we get the right pipe. And so a lot of companies are spending some research in terms of trying to get a better understanding of the condition of pipes before they do anything. And then the bottom one here is my particular bête noire, the one that I really want to deal with, is that there's little research into repair technology. It's an area that really needs smart solutions, okay? I have a real issue with this one at the moment because we are really lagging in terms of coming up with repair process solutions. We use the same method that the Romans used. Dig a big hole, cut out the bad bit and piece through. And it's one of the areas where I really want to promote research within our industry. I want to look at the innovation funding and how we can use that and start to come up with better ways of doing the repairs. Okay, smart internal repairs, robots in pipes. We've talked about those micro excavation techniques where we can just take out a smaller hole. The Northumbrian Innovation Festival actually looked precisely at that area. How can we actually deal with micro excavation? How can we come up with a better method of doing that and adapt technologies that are out there? We're looking, we've just put in a project on UCWear as part of the voting that's looking actually at micro excavation. Temporary repairs. One of the analogies I use frequently is to say, if you had a cut upon your arm, you wouldn't just leave it running full flow until you got to the hospital. You would locally reduce the pressure and you would put a temporary clamp on. If we can't get into a pipe, if we can't get to a pipe for a couple of for 4 or 5 days because it's by traffic lights, can we do anything to reduce the flow rate of that pipe? So where does that take us on our next steps? On there, I've got my team that are looking at that at the moment. So Andrew is part of that team as well. Dennis, a number of you know, and Sam Bright from Yorkshire. And we are looking at redrafting the route map at the moment and just making sure that we are picking up on all the areas that came out from the heat map work. Okay, demonstrating to the industry the areas that require increased focus, getting the message out there and saying, look, these are the things we've got to be focusing on now. And that's about putting out that heat map that I've just shown you, those results, and saying these are the solutions we're looking for. Making use of collaboration and funding opportunities, precisely. Okay, we have got for our industry an unrivaled opportunity at the moment. Okay, this is where we can really start to make a difference and use this collaboration tool that we've got, that we know where everybody's working on, but we've got this funding that's coming through. Bring those two together, make real opportunities and make some real change. Okay, I'm looking to revise the heat map in October, November. Now that will be a simple exercise to some degree of sending that back out to the water companies and saying, okay, this is what you told me you were working on. I'd like to see what you're now working on. So what's changed, what's dropped off, what are you adding in? So we will be doing that as an exercise in October and November. However, as part of that, I'm looking to expand it. Okay, so there's an update on the UK projects, but I would really be interested in adding in the supply chain. Now, I tried to do this when we first did the heat map, and I got some responses from a few companies. And if that was you, thank you very much. What we weren't able to do is because I had so few responses, I wasn't able to really do a heat map on that. But what I'd like to be able to do is have the supply chain saying, this is what we're working on as well. Now I recognize there's difficulties involved with that because you will have intellectual property that you don't want to share too much about. And yet at the same time, you want companies to be aware. I'm interested in working with some of the supply chain companies at the moment and coming up with a format for doing that. So if that's something you'd like to work with me with over the next month and just testing out a format for sharing that kind of information, do please contact me and I'd love to have a chat with you about how we can gather that information from supply chain. We're also going to be adding in academia as well, contacting the universities and asking for them to support this. Did that in the previous one and unfortunately didn't have a lot of returns on that one, but we will be trying to do that as well. But one thing that we have seen is publishing the heat map is international response. So I've had a lot of response internationally to this. I was talking to Hong Kong earlier this week. I've been talking to Australia, American companies as well. There is huge worldwide interest in the work that we have done here. And a lot of international water companies have asked, next time you do this, can we be included in that as well? And that gives us an opportunity to start mapping out innovation across the whole world in leakage. I am sticking to the leakage area. That's the area that I'm concentrating on for the BQ. So it will be on that area and that area only, but it'll be a great opportunity to see what worldwide innovation is going on between the water companies. Okay, that is it from me. I shall pause there.
That's fabulous. Thank you very much, Jeremy.
And let's see what.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Stop sharing my screen.
Thanks so much. And that sounds like an absolutely fantastic resource and one that's only going to get better as you extend and develop it. So yes, thank you so much for that. And also I think for the supply chain invitation to get involved, hopefully you'll get some take up on that. Right, we've got 5 minutes. We've got a question or a comment for you here in the chat. So we'll deal with that first. Says it's a great piece of work, Jeremy, really highlights the areas of opportunity to the supply chain. This person would be interested in understanding where digital applications, machine learning, digital twins, etc. fit in. It strikes me there is a lot of opportunity in the decision making which underpins physical processes. We had another comment about a digital twin a little higher up as well. So if you could address those points, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, so digital twins is an area that's got a lot of application, particularly when we're looking at smart networks. One of the things that I've been projecting and saying this is where we can start to see smart networks going is near real-time solutions. okay, and effectively starting to say, all right, this is what we think our network should be doing at this moment in time, and this is what's actually happening on our network at the same time. And it's that comparison between the two that then starts to highlight and go, something odd is going on in this small area on the top left-hand corner of this DMA. Our predictions say it should be doing this at this time of day, but actually what we're seeing is different. That's the beauty of the digital twin, is its ability to hone in and say, this is different, this has changed, something must be happening. What that gives us then, and the great stuff we've got coming through with the IoT solutions, the communication solutions, it gives us that near real-time data. And for the first time, water companies will know what's going on before their customers do. Now that sounds, you know, any other industry would go, well, of course you do. But within our industry, and particularly with our network, that has always been the huge struggle. Yeah, we relied upon our customers telling us there was something wrong with the system. The digital twins that we're starting to see come through now will enable us to be on the front foot and actually be contacting customers beforehand and saying, we know there's something going on in your area. You won't have noticed it yet, but we have.
Okay, thank you. And then we've got two more questions. I'll put them together just in view of time. So the first one is, how does innovation in the water industry in the UK and worldwide compare to other comparative industries such as gas supply, distribution? And the second one, do you expect there is going to be much of a change in the future UPWEAR research programme to focus more on the underrepresented areas?
Okay, so comparison with other areas like gas supply is typically we are lagging behind. Okay, and I'll be quite honest about that. Is we are lagging behind certainly in some. Andrea, you I can see your face there as well, going, I'm not sure. I think we are in certain areas, and part of that is because the value of our product is because actually water release is seen as being, it's not a very valuable product if it leaks, and therefore we don't have so much of an incentive. If you have a leak upon a gas pipe or an oil pipe or anything else like that, it's very vital that you find it quickly and repair it because of the secondary consequences of that leak. But with water, we don't have that. And actually the value of the product is quite cheap as well. So therefore you don't get that same imperative that we will see in oil and gas. Where that does give us is a great advantage, because we can start to look at oil and gas and go, well, you really are leading it. You look at things like micro excavation, they're way ahead of us. Yeah, and we look at the techniques they've got and we can see how we can adapt those into our industry. And that's the big opportunity that we've got at the moment, is taking those kind of technologies elsewhere and adapting them to where we are. Alan, good question. Yes, you will be seeing a change in the program because we do want to address it. Now, that doesn't mean to say that we won't be doing work in the areas where there's a lot of research. It's different types of project. So where you've got a lot of companies working in the same area, smart networks is a good one, as I've already mentioned. That's really an opportunity to go, okay, look, here's 9 companies, all working in the same area. Who's got the best stuff? It won't be one company. There'll be some that are best in one area, some best in others. And you start to do those kind of UPWEAR projects that goes, what's the best practice here? What's the best way of doing these? And start to cherry pick and choose the best bits from all the different networks that are out there. So some projects will start to do that kind of overview bit, but won't be doing fundamental research because everybody else is doing that already. The other bits will be where there isn't a lot of research taking place at the moment, okay? And where we see those as being important areas to solve for leakage, and as I said, for me, that's MEND is a really important one. Part of that is then going, okay, we need to start to do some more fundamental research in those areas and drive it through.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, we've got 2 minutes left. I just wanted to give Bob, you made a comment a little bit ago about innovation and leadership, and we've had expressions of interest in that in the chat from a couple of people. So if you just want to spend a minute talking through that point, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to those people directly about. It's a very new program, and I think this whole concept of the impact of leadership behaviours on innovation is quite new and emerging area within sort of management science. But we signed up a couple of our young and ambitious people within the company onto this one-year program that was sort of hosted by an ex-Olympic athlete I think the feedback has been very, very positive, not just from our candidates, but from others from all sorts of other backgrounds and sectors as well. So we will probably end up continuing to support that, and it's not massively expensive compared to some of the other management management training that is also available. So still relatively early days, but I think it's interesting. And I think, you know, we do in these conversations, apologies for saying this morning, but in these conversations we do get a bit focused on the tech side of innovation. And I think we tend to forget the cultural side, you know, all this stuff about collaboration and working together. It's about people and behaviours and cultures. And there's as much work to do in that area, if not more, in my view, than there is on the finding the bits of kit that we need to solve our problems. I'd just like to make one more comment there about, you know, on the innovation thing and the international scene. And I say this because I spent 10 years of my career working abroad, so I've kind of seen it from the outside in to some degree. I mean, we are not seen in the UK these days as a hotbed of innovation in the water sector. That mantle has been taken by the Singaporeans, the Israelis, the Netherlands to a large degree, and the North Americans. So having this new innovation kind of transformation, you might say, in the UK, I hope will restore that position, because 20 years ago, if you were from the UK and you were working around the world in the water sector, that was really respected. But I'm not sure that that's the same situation now, and I'm really hoping that this will help us restore that that leadership internationally.
Okay, thank you very much for those final thoughts there, Bob. We are at time, so I'm going to have to close the session, conscious of everybody's busy lives and diaries. So if you could just join me in thanking all of our speakers, so Pauline, Peter, who's now left, Bob, Andrea, Rachel, and Jeremy. And I think thank you all for your questions and for joining. Yeah. And I think we'd all probably like to thank Judith for putting this together. So I'll hand back to you, Judith, to close off.
Thank you very much, Carla. Thank you. I'd just like to reiterate all those thanks to all our speakers and contributors, and to you who've participated today in a lively exchange in the chat box. Thank you for that. Well, there are, we will circulate the links to all the key initiatives. We've been circulating those regularly. We'll reissue those to everybody so you can access the documents being referenced to. The recording from today's session will be available from tomorrow afternoon, we think. So we'll get that round to you all. And as always, if you've got any questions, do let me know. We'll also go back through the chat, and if we can resolve some of those questions that maybe we haven't got onto today, we'll look at how we can. But in the meantime, thank you all. Thank you to all our contributors, and thank you to everybody for participating today, and thank you to our sponsors and supporters for making it all possible. And have a great rest of the day, and see you on the 9th of February, virtually, and possibly before. Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.